Hey everyone, I'm going to talk about week 10 and Muckrakers. I know I've said this several times, but this is probably one of my most favorite subjects in media journalism in those studies. And where we were asked to answer three questions about Muckrakers. What are they? What is it? Is it legitimate? And can we find examples in modern media today? Um, so, muckraking, borrowing from Roosevelt's own description of it, is someone who attempts journalistic endeavors that plunged to the depths of the human condition. So they, and this, is any sector that touched public opinion, really. So big business, and I'm thinking like Standard Oil and the U.S. Steel, railroad, banking, and all of that really kind of touched people's lives, but also delving into like Jacob Riis in the photographing the kids on the streets in New York, and Upton Sinclair talking about the meatpacking industry. But those were all intersections with the public opinion, and muckraking really took the depths of the human condition and brought it up to light. One of the things I found really interesting is that muckrakers were their writing style was based on literary realism. So writers like Mark Twain and Jack London, who were known for putting their characters in realistic places and situations, and based on actual events, and the characters may be fake, but the situations in which these these characters are in were based on actual events. I have a minor in creative writing, and studying the literary realism was probably one of my favorite things, because it's an easy way to really capture conditions and to talk about things that are going on, whether you're writing about your own life and struggles that you're trying to work out, and seeing that translate into muckrakers was very interesting. And I think it's one of the reasons that made it a legitimate force to be reckoned with in the press, was that it's hard to argue with emotion. Rationally, you can argue facts all day long, what they mean, how they're interpreted, but it's really, really hard to argue, and almost impossible to argue with how someone feels about something. So if you can get the public outraged about monopolies in business, if you can get them frustrated about the corruption in the Senate, if you can show them how patent medicine is harming them, and you get that public outcry going, it puts an emotional pressure on legislative bodies to bring about that reform that alleviates that frustration. The other reason I think it's legitimate is, I saw an example with Upton Sinclair where he was trying to get The Jungle published, and the the publishers wanted to verify the story, and so their first guy was actually on the payroll for the stockyards, and was advised against not publishing the book. So Upton said, "No, hey, go send one of your own people to go see if this is true." And I think in doing that, he showed a excuse me, a sense that he, like the muckraker from the Pilgrim's Progress, he wasn't in this for the crown or for the glory. This was something that he wanted exposed, mostly to make it better for the people, the working conditions, and what was happening in the meatpacking industry. I think one of my favorite quotes from the reading was that he intended to hit the public in the heart, but hit them in their stomach by accident. But I think that's why it why muckraking worked, and it's a really good example of why it worked, is that a lot of the stories really hit the public where they were at. They've come from yellow journalism where everything's sensational and there are stunts that are being performed. So there is some skepticism as to, is it really legitimate, or are they just performing stunts to get things done? And I'm sure that there are examples of that where as McClure's is launching into this, that you've got others that are coming up and mimicking what was working for McClure's and other magazines, that their legitimacy may not be as it may not be as powerful as those of like Upton Sinclair and Ida Tarbell and other journalists of that nature. But I think magazines were the perfect avenue for this, as we can see in our text, that they're dealing with, they can go into in depth on the facts and the figures, and they can tell a more complete story where newspapers were having to compress and fit into literally a box on the page. Magazines they're not limited to that space. I did find it funny that there was, the stories that the Muckrakers were writing are sometimes, placed right next to the very thing that they're writing about, such as patent medicine, a story decrying that it's harmful, and what happens with the patent medicine is made out of is, there's an ad for it sitting right there next to it. But there's the magazine, I think, helped it become legitimate as well, because you could do the longer form in a magazine. You could talk about it in depth. You had more room to explore the facts and the people involved. The other thing that made it legitimate, I personally believe, was the ability to capture it all on film. I'm thinking of like Jacob Riis and the photography, the example that we see in the book with the street Arabs, the three homeless kids there in the worst tenement housing in New York on Mulberry Bend. And his photograph, it's hard to argue with the physical evidence. Yes, some did doctor photos and try to make it look worse than it really was, or alter it in some way that benefited the story rather than just presenting it. But I think that's what that not only is it being written about in a magazine with this sort of literary fare to it, which makes it read like a novel, so you're taking in a lot more information than just reading facts on a page, but you're also seeing it, and that can affect public opinion. It goes back to that arguing emotionally for it. I had a hard time thinking about examples for today, if we still see it. I think we see right now in social media and in microblogging and things like that, that the citizen can act as a muckraker. They do a lot of the same kinds of things in the photographs, and it's all very visual. But I think what we're seeing is like the end of muckraking, where there's just so much out there that it's really kind of hard to pay attention to. Plus, social media is so fragmented that you're really talking to that niche audience that's right in front of you. So it's really hard to talk about these big issues that affect a wide range of people. You might see stories on that are similar to muckraking, like on 60 Minutes and 2020, that do a lot of investigative journalism. I'm wondering, as major news outlets like CNN come up with, like CNN Plus, if we'll be able to see a lot more muckraking there, that kind of story. Right now, I think we see a lot of it in documentaries that are produced independently, like The Fix, that's talking about the drug industry in America. But I think right now we still see it in books, like Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and others that release their stories in a book format, I'm thinking of like stories like The Filter Bubble that talk about social media effects, and how we can what happens when you're able to filter conversations. So, um, see, is there anything else? No, I think that's it. Okay, thanks.